Hello, this is a video presentation on my Far Cry 5 custom level. This will be roughly something along the lines of 5 to 10 minutes long. It may go slightly above, uh, and I will be going over the design processes and rationale in regards to this level. So immediately, as you can see, when I load in the level from the level editor, the atmospheric fog post-processing and day and night cycle immediately kind of pops out at you. Uh, this was designed in consideration to the visual and audio affordances to help build up that tenser atmosphere. Now, I know it's a little difficult to see here, however, I'll show you in by just playing the level how it helps build that more tenser atmosphere. I use light sources such as little bonfires uh, to light around the rough pathway that the player can navigate through as an affordance to help guide them along the right path. So here you can see the atmospheric fog and then the different light sources in the braziers that help guide the player along the right path throughout where they can go. Similarly, this was done here in the little cave section of the level, so you can see the flares, which essentially have the same function as the braziers. So back to the arcade editor. Now, as for the environment layout, as you can see before, it's a roundish layout based off the light sources. I know it's a little difficult to see, so I'm going to actually turn off the fog to make it a little clearer on the eyes. So let's see. And this should make it a little bit easier. Okay, there we go. So yeah, as you can see, we have a roundish map uh, with a road for the car that was implemented over here, and the outpost in the center. Now, the level has been iterated on throughout, uh, and certain changes were made. So initially, there weren't as many structures around the edges. That wasn't initially over there, which is the boss segment, and then we have this area here, and then one there. And then the boss section was initially supposed to be in the outpost, but due to the scale of the outpost, it just wasn't able to fit in. Now, this level was designed in relation to linear and non-linear design, and I wanted to do something along the lines of like a hybrid design, something along the lines of the middle. So the players, in terms of linear aspect, the player would clear objectives in the level in a linear way. Uh, However, the level is designed so they can tackle it in any way they want. Uh, so they could go clear the VIP targets first at each of the little sections, or they can clear the outpost, and so on until all objectives are met. Now, the level is designed in terms of play types. It's designed for different stereotypes like the killer, the explorer, and achiever stereotypes. Uh, Now, this was designed this way so more people can have a more fulfilling experience uh, of this and express what they find fun based on their playstyles. So whether this is the sensation type of fun, narrative, challenge, or discovery. Things like player motivations were also looked into, such as uh, intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Uh, and in terms of intrinsic motivations, this would be something like the objectives, such as the VIP targets or the boss, or clearing out the outpost itself. As for extrinsic, this would be in relation to just completing the level or the build up of challenge, like the different enemies that are in the level and the boss itself. Now, as for that, in relation to that, uh, we have exploring the different mechanics now. As for mechanics, here I'm going to just focus on certain basic mechanics like the pickup system or vehicles as an example. So uh, I was able to find different aesthetics that suited different mechanics. In relation to NDA diagrams, this is like looking into the pickups, which lead to that discovery uh, type of aesthetic. So the player would discover items throughout the level and so on. Or when they clear enemies, sometimes they drop stuff. As for vehicles, these fit the sensation type of aesthetic. Uh, and allows the player to kind of immerse themselves into that mechanic and how that functions. And as for loadouts, which were created, these essentially provide the challenge type of aesthetic, uh, as each one of these loadouts are differently balanced, some being more difficult than others, providing that. So, as I said, the level was designed also in relation to the storytelling elements. So, for storytelling, I essentially just tried to create some kind of scenery to help illustrate the kind of events that transpired, such as burnt down buildings and potentially some sort of storytelling in areas like the little shops, uh, like over here. Potentially, we have a restaurant showing the different corpses of the civilians that lived in this outpost. A little area showing what happened, showing that they were trying to eat their food, however, unfortunately, met their end later on. Now, issues with this level overall, there weren't too many, however, issues did arrive when it came to creating the cave. So, as for creating the cave, the main issue with this was essentially when you're under the map, uh, you can't actually see the ground. So when making this cave, it became a very long and tedious process. There wasn't a proper ground set up either, so I had to go through and redo it. Now, the cave issues stemmed from validation as well. I initially wanted to create some kind of little tutorialization if I wanted to, potentially. However, this is designed for players who've already played the game, so it isn't really required. But I just wanted some basic enemies in a close quarter cave element to make it seem more tense, into like with the fog, some basic enemies that the player would have to take on before they make it to the outpost. Now, as for enemy placements, I've typically in Far Cry levels, the enemies kind of patrol around the outpost, so I wasn't really too worried about my placements as much as looking into quantity of enemies. So initially, I've had something around 48 enemies in this level, I believe. However, this amount seemed to be too much, so a lot of these ended up being taken out and reduced down by at least 8 enemies, I believe so, to make it more balanced. Some of the loadouts were changed as well, based on this. Now, as for the scripting elements, this was I one of the most difficult parts, I would say. In terms of scripting, I essentially tried to create some conditions for some objectives. So I wanted an objective when the player kills the three VIP targets in each of the little outpost areas, they would ideally drop the key. Now this key would have then opened up this doorway that can then lead to rescuing the civilian. However, this function wouldn't work, so instead I opted for a destructible mesh that gets destroyed once the targets are killed. However, these destructible meshes essentially fell over or were able to get pushed by the enemies, so I had to resort to placing these logs as a way to keep these in place to prevent the player and enemies from actually entering this place until the objective was complete. Ideally, there would have been some form of cinematics, however, I've had issues trying to figure the process out, so I just left it as it's not required as part of the assessment brief. And instead, I opted for a teleportation mechanic, so when the player enters this cylinder volume, the player gets teleported over to the boss fight, where the player will then take on the enemy over here. Once the blood dragon is defeated, the player gets teleported to the final area, where uh, the last enemy should remain in the level, and once this enemy is defeated, the level is then over.